Hello everyone, I'm Hala Alramahi. I'm a master's student at Okan University. My research topic is urban development and it's supervised by Professor Dr. Samih Arialdez. Urban planning. The definition of urban planning is the design and regulation of the uses of the space that focus on the physical form, economic functions, and social impacts of the urban environment, and on the location of different activities within it. Because urban planning draws upon engineering, architectural, and social and political concerns, it's variously a technical profession, an endeavor involving political will and public participation, and an academic discipline. Urban planning concerns itself with both the development of open land like a greenfield sites and the revitalization of existing parts of the city, thereby involving goal setting, data collection and analysis, forecasting, design, strategic thinking, and public consultation. Urban planning is also popularly known as town planning. It encompasses many different disciplines, attempts to accomplish sustainable, user-friendly, economic, and social organization of all elements of a town, city, or any other urban environment. It has to take care of the residents, housing, employment, recreation, trade and business, sanitation, mobility, and communication, besides preserving the natural and built heritage of the place. In the next section, we shall briefly browse through the history of planning from that of ancient cities to its present form. Converse and Hales, 1984, defined planning as a continuous process which involves decisions and choices about normative ways of using available resources with the aim of achieving particular goals at some time in future. There are many other specialized streams of planning that constitute urban planning: environmental planning, transport planning, land use planning, housing, etc. Regional planning involves planning at a larger scale comprising of both urban and rural planning. Brief history and evolution of urban planning. In history, there is evidence of permanent human settlements at around 10,000 BP. Before the discovery of agriculture, there were basically settlements of hunters and gatherers who didn't use extensive agriculture but had some knowledge about the basic principles. Agriculture was the result of the combination of climate change that made available new land areas of the planet and of social and technological factors. There was a trend of a growth of population due to a better priority control. This growth of population showed some constraints as the communities of hunters and gatherers couldn't sustain increased pressure on the environment by human inhabitants without collapsing. Population control was implemented through infanticide, longer periods of lactation, or sexual inhibition. All these measures were a psychological and a social burden. The development of agriculture made it possible to establish an important food surplus in towns, with a resulting increase in commerce, the creation of important surroundings. Towns with public buildings made of brick or stone appeared for the first time around the 3rd and 4th millennium before Christmas in the rich valleys of the Indus River, the delta area of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the lower Nile Valley, and the East China coasts. The first towns were human settlements that were established when human society evolved from hunting, gathering, to an agricultural one. Agriculture as an occupation required settling close to water sources that are needed for irrigation. Thus, ancient civilizations were cities and settlements on river banks such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa at the Indus Valley, Egypt at the Nile, Mesopotamia, Tigris and Euphrates, going back to the Bronze Age like 3000 BC to 150 BC, as we can see them at the figure. So, as society became more complex, cities started being planned on the basis of societal and religious hierarchies. The great cities of Rome, Athens, etc., all had hierarchical planning where the most important structures, public or religious, occupied the center, and all other functions of the town were planned concentrically or radially around this structure, with their importance decreasing as their distance increased from the center. Similar examples are seen in many Islamic cities or temple towns in South India, where the main mosque or temple occupies the highest or central point, and the rest of the town is planned around it. In the 16th-17th century, land occupation by communities or tribes for settlement became the primary objective, and thus cities started being planned as citadels, fortifications, or within-walled enclosures. With increased globalization, sea travel, and trade in the 18th century, market towns and ports gained huge importance and centers of trade across the globe. In fact, the most powerful countries were those with mighty naval fleets and prosperous port cities as capitals. All colonizers such as the English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Dutch, etc., captured areas in far off places due to their naval dominance, and planning practices also got globalized and more universal. Urban planning metamorphosed into its modern form owing to the Industrial Revolution with the advent of machines, new construction technology, and cars. The scale of a town underwent tremendous expansion in terms of having wider roads, taller buildings, spread out cities due to extensive railroad networks, huge industries, etc. Areas that were not very good for crops started developing into industrial centers and manufacturing townships called factory towns. But in a few years, all these towns were brought with squalor as people had been accommodated in minimum living area with no attention towards sanitation. The only focus was industrial mass production in these towns, where the elite lived in more sanitized quarters of the cities. Epidemics and diseases resulted in further transformation in city planning with more attention to sanitation and aesthetics. So, to continue the historical and current roots, planning gained popularity in the mid to late 19th century when it became obvious that there should be some kind of a plan or larger goals for the growth of big cities like New York, London, and Paris, etc., as they had grown haphazardly and disproportionately to the available infrastructure. In America, this transformation was called the City Beautiful movement, and large tracts of land were cleared for the purpose of building public areas like parks and plazas. Urban designers, landscape designers, and architects gained great importance as professionals besides urban planners. Land use planning and zoning became the most necessary tools for planning of cities. There have been criticisms of this movement in terms of non-involvement of common people and pushing the poor to the periphery in order to make the city look good. Urban planning for the past 100 years has sadly not transformed much. It's only recently that environmental sustainability and people's participation have become pertinent issues to be considered by planners, and hopefully city planning will evolve into a more inclusive, just and ecologically sensitive practice. As we can see in the figure, the timeline of the urban planning improvement. Urban development definition. Urban development means development which is not of a rural character and is differentiated from rural development by its scale, intensity, visual character, and the dominance of built structures. Urban development may also be characterized by a reliance on reticulated services such as a water supply, wastewater, and stormwater, and by its cumulative generation of traffic. It covers the infrastructure for education, health, justice, solid waste, markets, streets, pavements, and cultural heritage protection. These constructions usually form part of specific sector programs, including capacity building measures. Special attention is also paid to slums of large cities. Rehabilitation and reconstruction comprises in a particular social infrastructure following natural disasters or conflicts. The natural expansion. Population growth in major cities requires expansion. Urban developers look to neighboring natural territories to build needed housing and recreational areas. Natural expansion is the creation of residential areas in undeveloped or undeveloped regions. Natural expansion requires the destruction of the wilderness. However, urban planners must work closely with environmental protection agencies, ensure that protected wildlife and plant life are not destroyed. Urban renovation. In extremely populated areas, natural expansion is not always possible. If a large city is surrounded by other cities, there is no place for the larger city to expand into. In this case, urban planners look to renovate decaying neighborhoods, obsolete industrial districts, and other unused spaces. On a much larger scale than natural expansion, urban renovation requires the compliance of city dwellers. City planners and urban developers carefully consider the needs of population in renovating urban areas. Here we can see in the picture, this building was part of an urban project to restore the old buildings in the Ottoman town in Alexandria. The Ottoman town has a lot of great buildings that need to be renovated. This building was part of this project, and I tried to see how it will look like through a sketch project done with some friends in the postgraduate studies. Sustainable urban development. In the last few decades, important changes have occurred in the quality of built environment due to rapid industrialization and urbanization. There have been serious effects on climate, biodiversity, and natural resources. So, as a result of development pressure on green fields, urban green areas become small, scattered, and polluted. Development of transportation networks caused negative impacts such as energy consumption, emission of air pollutants, traffic congestion, and noise. On the other hand, the degradation and depletion of urban landscapes threaten health-related quality of life of the population. According to the causes of these environmental problems, it becomes necessary to revise the current urban policies and develop new planning models for sustainable urban development. So, to achieve sustainable urban development, cities must be planned and managed to form a balance between human being and natural environment by using resources carefully and transferring them to the next generations in order to protect and enhance environmental conditions of future generations. It's essential to provide the sustainability of urban ecosystem. Therefore, the concept of ecological planning, eco-planning, becomes a functional requirement in achieving sustainable built environment. It's an effective tool that aims to form an urban development in harmony with ecological, social, and economic values. So, development and sustainability. Sustainability's applicability to three elements of life: nature, people, and business, as represented in Figure 1. So, the interlocking circles show that all three of these categories are highly interdependent. Sustainable development. Sustainable development seeks to establish a balance between human needs and environmental preservation. Urban planners consider maintaining sustainable development in expanding and renovating urban areas. When an urban area expands into wildlife regions, much care is taken to integrate the wilderness with the developing city. Sustainable development in urban expansion focuses on curtailing the city's production of pollution, increasing the availability of recycling facilities, and focusing on the efficient usage of alternative energies. As we can see in the figures, the main sustainable urban development element to have an integrated development. Difficulties of sustainable development. Urban development is a time consuming and expensive process. It requires joint efforts between organizations, institutions, and individuals. It requires major funding by governments, corporations, and individuals. The development of urban areas through renovation and expansion require major transformation of existing neighborhoods, industries, transportation systems, sewage and waste management systems, technologies, and cultures. Urban developers must find a balance not only in preserving the natural environment and the development of a large city, but also in maintaining the culture and atmosphere of the original city. For example, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, urban developers in New Orleans are considering how to build a city safe from natural disaster, but also retain the vibrancy and culture of the famous city. Criticisms. While urban development is a necessity as a global populations grow, there are many criticisms of the system. Many consider the external influences of the government and urban planners to be detrimental to the development or renovation of urban areas. Critics of these external influences argue that the inhabitants of cities should have more influence in the renovation and development of their neighborhoods because urban planning is focused on future development. Many argue that the field ignores current problems. Urban Design Compendium. Sustainable communities need many factors to be integrated, as shown in the following figure: transport and connectivity, services, governance, environmental equity, economy, housing and the built environment, and social and cultural wise. Coming to the topic of greening the city. Greening the city refers to strategies and techniques that protect and restore ecology within urban communities. It means combining urbanism and nature to create healthy, civilizing, and enriching places to live. It means a living area governed more by nature than legislature and a sustainable human settlement based on ecological balance, community self-reliance, and participatory democracy. Urban ecology strives to create, preserve, and restore green and open spaces sustainably. It provides many environmental benefits. It reduces the urban heat island effect, minimizes our use of pesticides, conserves energy, clean urban air, and absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But urban ecology also offers a practical day to day understanding and linkage between urbanities and nature. Environmental awareness and activism should also be encouraged to focus on issues inside the city. So, creating sustainable green spaces can begin with community parks as they offer a host of ways to reduce the environmental impacts of cities. The restoration and the preservation of open spaces is another target for sustainable green initiatives, as in the desire to incorporate greening into private outdoor spaces. Some urban neighborhoods with their asphalt roads, concrete sidewalks, and concrete block property boundaries need more greenery in their street level aesthetic, while other neighborhoods may have adequate green spaces without benefiting from their multifunctional use and realizing their socio-environmental potential. So, additionally, sustainability in urban green space is not only desirable but profitable too. Sustainable development. Sustainable, highly developed cities largely contribute to the economic health and productivity of society. On the other hand, poor urban planning can bring on opposite harmful effects like constant heavy traffic, insufficient infrastructure, inadequate housing options. Such areas can also become exposed to a number of natural hazards, including fires, flooding, and climate change. Urban planning also influences property development since the city's sustainability depends on following the state set objectives. So, the way our cities grow undoubtedly has a massive impact on the economy, ecology, and the quality of life because of seven reasons. The first reason is planned city growth. City development is always most efficient when it's orderly in line with a specific vision. After all, it relies on a framework that takes into account the current and future needs of the city's population. The second reason, improved health and quality of life. When it comes to concerns that most cities dwellers share, quality of life is among the greatest. It's true that greater opportunities can attract people to urban environments. And the third reason is less environmental impact. As the entire planet faces issues caused by global warming, cities are starting to adapt more and more environmental consideration. In fact, the United Nations recently issued a list of development goals with the purpose of reaching sustainability, making impact assessments mandatory for development projects in the cities. And about the fourth reason, better economy and resource utilization. Well developed cities have sprawling markets with plenty of job opportunities. Naturally, this boosts the city economy and impacts every aspect of urban life. However, cities still need investment to keep their economies growing, and they are always competing for financial input. And the fifth reason is national development. Urban areas have always been the centers of development and growth, often leading the nation into progress. That situation remains the same today, and the critical role cities play in national development will likely become even more pronounced. The sixth reason, disaster prevention and greater credibility. Urban planning can allow for better predictions and reactions to natural disasters, with sound strategies reinforced by the rational placement of infrastructure. Cities can prevent most calamities or at the very least reduce their harmful effects. The better city is planned, the more prepared it will be for any future events. The urban area will become a safer place for numerous residents, visitors, and tourists alike. The last reason, more efficient problem solving. Problem solving doesn't necessarily mean reacting when an issue appears. Instead, a more efficient way to resolve issues is through anticipation. If a problem is anticipated, it can be secured against from the start, or in the worst case, would require less effort to solve. So, for planning for a better life in urban areas, urban planning encompasses and influences many aspects of city life, from matters of economy through social and environmental concerns to safety and well-being. A through constant plan and can make life in urban areas almost idyllic. On the other hand, a lack of such plans can turn a city into unlivable environment. In modern times, more cities are turning towards sustainable solutions that require urban planning, which affects urban development to a large extent. Some architects or urban planners come with the Archstar proposal. Archstar can be used by town planners to aid them in making optimal planning and development decisions. They can discover the highest and the best use of any site, saving time whilst also bringing certainty and transparency to the development process. And we can see some of the proposals in the next figures. Another feature of greening the city is the development of urban agriculture. Food, for instance, is a basic human need, and a just sustainable food system protects the land which produces food, supports the local economy through local production, empowers communities through self-reliance, and gives them an increased food system security, enhance community well-being through improved health and nutritional conditions, an increased sense of community, and an increased environmental health because of reduced transportation of food. At the next picture, we can see a proposal for greening some city areas in China. Then, the methodology that they used, from patterns, mechanisms, effects, and drivers. Valuing urban environmental problems. The challenge of environmental planning is to value the effects of urban environmental problems in terms of health effects, productivity, amenity, ecological values, and other key indicators. By categorizing impacts in this way, emphasis can be placed in the following areas. The first area is health and safety. In examining health and safety effects, assessment criteria include healthcare costs, lost working days, and higher mortality rates. The second one is productivity. Any assessment should judge the extent of losses in urban productivity, which results from poorly operated infrastructural systems and mismanagement environmental surveillance services. The third one is equity. Issues of equity are of a critical importance because the negative effects of urban environmental degradation fall disproportionately on the poor. A priority in urban improvement programs is increased attention to such low income areas. The fourth one is ecology. Ecological effects can be judged on the availability and costs of water and land resources, the vulnerability to natural disasters, and the loss of biological diversity. The last one is amenity. Effects on amenity include air and water quality, noise levels, beauty scenes, and the presence of parks and clean open spaces. For to establish environmental priorities may be by conducting rapid assessments and building a typology divided into externalities and impacts, including those arising from inadequate environmental health situations. Here in this figure, we can see the main urban environmental problems and the methodology that has been followed to solve them, leading to a sustainable urban environment. The importance of eco-planning for sustainable urban development. We are faced with a whole series of global environmental problems which are harming the biosphere and human life in alarming ways that may soon become irreversible. The great challenge of our time is to create sustainable communities, that is, social and cultural environments in which we can satisfy our needs without diminishing the chances of future generations. In terms of urban development, ecologically oriented principles related to sustainability include compact urban form, which saves open space, reduces driving, and produces walkable communities; transit-oriented development, which likewise reduces automobile and fossil fuel use; closed-loop resource cycles, ensuring that water, metals, wood, paper, and other materials are recycled; environmental justice, integrating environmental and equity concerns, pollution prevention, and the restoration of ecosystem components within cities and towns. These and other strategies are ways to move towards a radically greener society, one which can coexist with the Earth's limited resources and often fragile ecosystems in the long run. In the 70s, discussions occurred about the prevention of environmental problems were followed by intensive debate on sustainable development. However, in recent years, ecological approaches and planning concepts gained more widespread attention and importance. The increasing concern has informed the integration of environmental protection into national and local policies. However, countries still carrying on various studies and practices on finding ecological solutions to environmental problems. Consequently, this concern has led to the development of ecological priorities for urban planning process, and it has become a necessity to develop new frameworks for preventing the degradation in nature while ensuring the sustainability of resources. Eco-planning is a fundamentally multidimensional concept providing a wide range of environmental, economic, and social benefits to local governments, developers, and the community as a whole. Environmentally, it creates ecologically effective green areas, reduces ecological risks, and improves the quality of water, air, and soil. Economically, it prevents urban sprawl and traffic congestion, provides better utilization of existing infrastructure. Socially, it reduces health risks, improves the quality of urban life and city services like health, education, transportation, and recreation. So, with all these benefits, This research will present further opportunities to turn unsustainable urban areas from a problem to a future resource as a sustainable environment. Now I'm going to show 3 case studies of urban development projects. The first one is the restoration of Cheongji-cheon River at Seoul at South Korea. The year of project is 2002. The main goal was an urban development to the city. Here we can see the goals of the project and history and a brief before the restoration and after the restoration. Here we can see the historical map of Seoul and the solution or the old solution of covering the river, lifting buildings from the ground and lifting streets from the ground into the bridges, and there was no sanitations at the early of 20th. At this page we can see why they have decided to restore the area of the river. So they have decided to restore this area because development leads to high quality of life, to convert Seoul to environment friendly city, a fundamental solution to a safety problem, recovery of history and culture, revitalization of downtown area, and also as a balanced regional development. As a process, this project started with the demolition, as we can see. Then the design criteria has studied the flood level and combined sewage system for rainfall and wastewater and capacity 3 times of estimated wastewater and minimize flow resistance and create a cultural places and artistic landmarks with a 22 bridges. So it was an international concept design competition turned into an urban development project. Here is some of the challenges at this project, then the solutions to these challenges. We can see also the construction progress in different pictures and different phases. Now I'm going to talk about Barcelona as a case study for urban development. Barcelona was planned at 1856 with the goal of good urban life for the city. The main concept was that the shape of Barcelona is geographically limited between the sea and the surrounding mountains and 2 rivers. So the walled city of Barcelona and the pressure of urbanization. These positions limited the urban development and the access roads to Barcelona, which is the most important feature of Barcelona and the most important problem as well. Considering the difficulty of growing and of making a large urban expansion, it later gives the priority for the development of the coast with the possibility of maintaining and protecting the surrounding mountains. Taking the case of Barcelona, Spain, it's one of the greatest examples of a city rich with culture and traditions. The city was completely transformed into a rigid grid modernist planning layout. Each block was designed as low-rise built mass with wide sidewalks by broad tree-lined boulevards. The concerns of each block are notched at 45-degree angles to allow more sunlight and air to flow through the streets. As per many urban thinkers, the designer of Barcelona was perhaps the most famous large-scale urban master plan in the world and is often cited as a model for modern mixed-use neighborhoods. So, as a conclusion of the case study of Barcelona, the city was designed for people, not cars. So, this statement gives a complete answer for city revival. To make a city work, urban planners must optimized for sustainable measures for mobility networks, environment-friendly techniques, and most importantly, human experience. Everyone should have easy access to the city's streets, squares, and parks. These spaces actually define and reflect the city's culture, values, and traditions, and give an opportunity for its residents to get themselves involved for better living. Hence, it's rightly said that the spaces between buildings hold the whole city together. The third case study is the river city Gothenburg. It's located in Sweden, and we are going to talk about Gotha River specifically. The project year was 2011. The main goal was connecting and developing the river city of Gothenburg. The first challenge was that the highway infrastructure forms strong barriers and a network of urban infrastructure which links it with neighboring areas, and the sub-region is lacking for connecting River City. The second challenge was, however, the key question is how to achieve a quantum leap in quality inside River City in order to start a more intense urban use of the area. From a harbor past, it's to evolve into an attractive and dynamic urban area. This won't be possible without structural improvements in the preconditions for its development. Upgrading the quality of River City is essential for that purpose. The third challenge was the polycentric one, creating therefore new poles of urban activity closer to the different parts of the agglomeration. The concept of such a polycentric city of Gothenburg is not only driven by the needs of a modern city, but also by the specific geographic setting of this city with its pithal-like structure arranged around the river Gotha and the adjacent hill. The project main methodology was to open up the city from the river, and that means redefining the connections between the river and its metropolitan hinterland. This is a very powerful strategy for this project. And for the accessibility means creating a new north-south link and a new east-west link for slow traffic to connect River City and the north of Gothenburg to the river and the city center. It also means transforming what today are transit routes that cross River City into urban streets. River City looks today like a little Los Angeles when it comes to the dominance of functional road infrastructure, make it a walkable city. The other strategies was to make it a more green and add a livable area like greening some area of the city. The last one was the dense or dynamic. It means creating multiple urban cores which is possible to appreciate a certain intensity and quality of urban life. Here we can see the proposed master plan for the project and the 3D proposal with the new transportation networks. So, choosing a project related to the research topic, I have chosen urban development for TigrisRiver and Aden Island in Baghdad, and named the project the Vivid City. And it will be a cultural, historical, economical, social, ecological, and geographical development. As a site background, the location is in Iraq, Baghdad, named as Aden Island. The Tigris River has a total length of 1,850 kilometers, which means it's quite a bit shorter than the Euphrates, which has a total length of approximately 2,800 kilometers. Its basin covers a total area of 375,000 of square kilometers. It flows all the way from the southeast of Turkey through Turkish Kurdistan for about 400 kilometers and subsequently becomes part of the Syrian-Turkish border. That's also the only stripe in which it runs through Syria for about 44 kilometers. The Tigris River flows for 1,406 kilometers in Iraq before it reaches the Arabian Gulf. Baghdad is suffering of several political issues that impact the society in a negative way on the culture, social life, economy, science and art in Baghdad. So according to the damage spreading, Baghdad become called the Black City. According to the last statistics from the relevant organization concerned in studying human behavior and psychology, Baghdad was classified as the saddest city in the world. So it's one of our duties as architects concerned in reviving cities to revitalizing devastated areas and bring the hope back to the residents of these cities. As an attempt by us as architects concerned with revitalizing cities and drawing joy on the faces of their residents, the idea of this project was chosen with different aims to raise the cultural, economical, and psychological awareness of the region and its residents by reviving the most important access that provides Baghdad with life, which is the Tigris River. Accordingly, the most suitable area will be selected to restore hope to Baghdad. Site selection criteria. After consulting a committee of architects in charge of urban development in the riverine areas in Baghdad, in addition to conducting several questionnaires for the residents of Baghdad, 4 bases were reached for the selection of the site. The first one, the geographical composition of the river banks in the region. The second is the historical importance of the populated and uninhabited areas on the river sides. The third was choosing the site near the most important cultural, historical, and vital landmarks in Baghdad. And the last one is the efficiency of natural energy in the region. So, the river restoration in general is the process of managing rivers to reinstate natural processes to restore biodiversity, providing benefits to both people and environment. Reintroducing natural processes can reshape rivers to provide the diversity of habitats required for a healthy river ecosystem and ensure their long-term recovery by addressing the root cause of the issue. At the following map, we can see the site area, including the main zone, the Aden Island, and it was named by Frank Lloyd Wright, and the second zone is the University of Baghdad zone, designed by Walter Gropius, and it's one of the most important landmarks in Baghdad. The project aims. This project have many aims, like economical aims, providing many job opportunities in the region, plus the project will be an attractive point for investors. Social aims. Connecting the two banks of the river will increase the social cohesion between their inhabitants. So, the project will provide social justice among all segments of society because it will be available to all. And moving to the environmental aims, because the island was neglected, it was exposed to human waste accumulation in addition to the presence of a chemical waste dump for the factories of the region. So, revitalizing this area will include waste recycling centers and a water purification center. The tourist aims, attracting tourists due to the new functions added to the site, plus reviving river tourism. Cultural aims. Iraq is the source of music without an opera house, so reviving Frank Lloyd Wright's idea of designing the opera house on the island, adding a network of cultural spaces inspired by the history of the region will be designed in order to increase the cultural and artistic awareness for the project visitors. The educational aims, providing educational places and training workshops for the University of Baghdad, creating interactive cultural zones and canals between visitors to the place and university students. The recreational aims, providing public squares and public playgrounds for the residents of the area and others for visitors, plus adding recreational riverine activities. The vision of the project. The apparent inefficiency in the handling of land use functions along the waterfront requires the development of procedures and legal frameworks to reduce the loss of the significant benefits offered by the presence of a historic river, which pass into the heart of the urban fabric of the city of Baghdad. Procedures that must be implemented to improve the existing situation vary in terms of financial cost, the time period to achieve them. Among the measures recommended, developing a special urban design scheme for the waterfront stripe in the form of a master plan and building controls specifically for the area in order to regulate land uses as well as height, bulk, and density of structures. The preparation and implementation of a specialized management commission with a financial and legal support from the central and local government due to the extreme importance of Baghdad as the political and economic federal capital. Urban design principles and practice should give priority to land use promoting recreational, environmental, and open green spaces uses over other land uses. Achieve easy access to the river through a redesign of the transportation network surrounding the river waterfront so as to achieve connectivity and facilitate access to water vistas. Guarantees free public access to river banks throughout the day and night. Expanding existing areas which afford spaces free of charge to the public of recreational purposes, provide shade from the elements and employ public sculptural arts to create attractive public spaces with stripe adjacent to the river. Increase compliance of current land uses, the vision and objectives stated in the city's master plan and laws. Historical background of TigrisRiver. The river's seasonable flooding regularly watered the region, creating arable land that encouraged humankind's early sedentary farming communities. As agricultural methods continued to develop, the farmers of Mesopotamia and Sumer dug irrigation canals from the Tigris to help water their fields in times of low rainfall or drought. Evidence of these early forms of field irrigation ditches and canals date back to the 6th and 7th millennium before Christmas. Additionally, some of the region's first cities grew along the bank at important natural ports and bends in the river. Around 2400 BC, the Sumerian even dug a long canal from the Tigris to provide a water supply for the burgeoning ancient city-state of Lagash. In addition, the Tigris served as a main avenue for ancient commerce in the region, as goods and crops were shipped throughout the region using the river. Over time, through natural processes of soil erosion due to the seasonal flooding, the Tigris grew increasingly salty. Some historians estimate that as early as 2000 before Christmas, the Tigris was too salty and unsuitable to be used as irrigation for agriculture. Despite this, it continued to be used for trade and transportation. As we can see at the following pictures, different captures at the early of the 20th century in TigrisRiver. Frank Lloyd Wright and the Opera House proposal. In 1957, American architect Frank Lloyd Wright designed the Iraqi Opera House and chose the Green Island after naming it the Island of Aden. Wright says in a previous report that was conducted with him, "I don't care about building an opera house in New York or London, but building it in Baghdad has a different story." In fact, Wright was so impulsive that it was said that if he built the Baghdad Opera House, it would be the most important thing he had done before his death in 1959. The turmoil of the situation and the outbreak of the July 14 revolution prevented the implementation of the plan. Now, 63 years after his design, The island is neglected and referred to investment in real estate projects, so Lord's dream is lost forever. The attached drawings are Lloyd's proposal for the Iraqi Opera House. The geographical background of Tigris River, surrounded by four countries, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, the Tigris River is the second largest river in the Western Asia. With the effort, it makes up a river system that borders Mesopotamia in the area known as the Fertile Crescent, as an important source of both travel and irrigation. The Tigris also has a rich history that dates back to the earliest known civilization because of its importance to a largely arid region. While the local population used the Tigris as a source of fresh water, agriculture is the primary focus for the people near the river. The region's low rainfall and hot and dry summers means that irrigation is necessary for growing crops. So while such irrigation can sometimes lead to problems in water quality, the Tigris is generally considered to have acceptable quality. The Tigris is also used for hydropower, which has led to the construction of dams in the region to harness the power of its flow. The work of Julia Hart, under funding from a National Geographic grant, explored the consequences of using such power on the history and people of the area. Innovations and advancements along the same lines of hydropower will continue to create an evolving landscape for local governments and people of the region. The following map shows the main bridges that connect the two river banks of Tigris River in Baghdad together, with attached photo for each one of them. The climate analysis for the site. Like a quick climate information, the hottest month is July, the coldest month is January, wettest month February, and the windy one is June. The following illustrations shows all the important climatic analysis to design any project in the site, like the sunrise and set hours, sun hours, daylight and twilight, wind direction in Baghdad, Iraq, so we can welcome the summer wind and avoid the winter wind. The following charts show another data about the climate in Baghdad, like the average minimum and maximum temperatures in Baghdad, average precipitation, average humidity, average wind speed, average rainy days, average climate like a temperature and precipitation. So the best time of the year to visit Baghdad, Iraq is during the month of March and November. Average temperatures that fall between 20 degrees and 25 at this period of time. The warmest month is July, the coldest is January, the wettest one is December, and the driest month is August. The sunniest month also in Baghdad is August. Urban development of Baghdad. The following maps show the timeline of Baghdad's sprawl and expansion with the spatial accessibility at a different periods of time. This map is a more detailed plan for the limits of Baghdad at different periods of times, like starting with 1090 until the 2000. So it's obvious that Baghdad limits has expanded. Also, the attached photos shows a different periods of time of Baghdad. Land use of Baghdad. The following maps shows the difference of the land use map in 1984 and Baghdad in 2020, with the built up area, the water, the vegetations, the soil. So this summarizes the flora and fauna. The philosophy and the concept of the project. As a methodology of the project, art, music, and poetry. because Baghdad is a city that combines music, art, and poetry. The use of this great cultural mix in the functions of the project will increase the cultural and artistic value of the project. And the following sketches show some of the art kinds in Baghdad. Also here we can see some of Baghdad at the past and Baghdad in the present. So using some elements from the old architecture in Baghdad and mixing them with modern elements to give a different character to the region. It will be like using a glass bridge between the historic elements and the new ones, as we can see in the following illustrations. Concept and philosophy. Al-Mutanabbi Street. Baghdad has a great history in the field of books and libraries, where it's considered as the first capital in the world to contain a public library, and continued to shine with books until modern time. So Baghdad opened Al-Mutanabbi Street, which is considered one of the longest dedicated pedestrians in the city, and its aspects contain popular libraries selling the books with reasonable price. So creating different plazas, or to be accurate, different cultural plazas, pedestrian walkways, and local cafes to reflect the poetic image of the city and give the poets their space to give their popular poems. So بغداد والشعراء والصور. بغداد والشعراء والصور. It means that Baghdad and the poetry and photos. Nuhad Wadi Haddad, known as Fairuz, is a Lebanese singer. She is considered by many as one of the leading vocalists and most famous singer in the history of the Arab world. Fairuz was famous for her patriotic songs, and the most important widespread of the songs are the City of Jerusalem song and the Baghdad song. And this song became a distinctive mark to this day, and some poets even used this phrase in their poems. So in this project we will reflect this quote with the poetic dual plazas and photo gallery with an outdoor amphitheater. So the movement will start with stepping outdoor space with a central plaza for the poetic dual, moving us to the photo gallery. The current models and typology of buildings in Baghdad. Baghdad is famous for using arches in the buildings' facades and using them for creating arcades to give shaded places to walk away from the hot sun rays according to the city's climate. As we can see in the following pictures at the top of the page. So, for the movement between two river banks, in this project we will use the idea of boat taxi in Baghdad to move between the two river banks to reduce the traffic congestion through bridges came from using the Tigris Guffa that the Iraqi people used at the past. So the idea of the river taxi came from the Tigris Guffa. And the following two charts showing the sustainable urban development elements that will be used in this project. Project program. Here we can see the project main functions: residential zones, apartments complex, villas complex, neighborhood gardens. The cultural zones will contain opera house, theater, museum, library, cinema, cultural plazas, and Al-Mutanabbi Street. Tourism and recreational zones will contain hotel, aqua park, horses stable, bungalows, stargazing area, fishing harbor, restaurant, and chalet. Commercial zones will contain malls, heritage market, retail shops, handicraft workshops, offices, hypermarket, and banks branches. The administration will have a project administration and a secondary zones administration. The environmental buildings will be the water purification center, the recycling center, and the green spaces. Public services like a school, clinic, parking, mosque, public toilets, visitor center, and public gardens, and of course, public plazas. So, the project program, here we can see different schedules. Each one shows a detailed areas for every unit. The first one shows the administration units. The second one, the cultural zones like theater, cinema, museum, opera house, library, with each detailed room or function for every unit. Then we can see the commercial zones, tourism and recreational zones. The commercial zones contain commercial offices, retail stores, money exchange, bank branches, heritage market, handicrafts workshops, kiosks, shaded seating areas, food kiosk services, and more. The tourism recreational areas shows the riverine boat areas, riverine areas restaurants, island zone of chalets, aqua game, fishing area, stargazing area, corniche, local cafe, hotel, entrance, lobby and reception, administration, restaurant, and different kind of rooms with bungalows also. Also, we have the residential zones program with the different kinds of apartments or villas, and the environmental zones contain the water purification center and recycling center. Here we can see the areas of each service for the project. Master plan zoning and circulation. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Aden Island was neglected for a while, so adding projects with various functions will give a center of attraction of investors and tourists, in addition to the residents of Baghdad. So the project will be the first of its kind in Baghdad. Also, as we can see in the zoning, I have redesigned the surrounding roads and the transportation networks around the island. Also, I have added some infills between the buildings and renovate the neglected one and replan the urban fabric of the area. Okay, then moving to the zoning of the island, we can see the main functions sitting at the different areas of the island with a completely new circulation for the island. Also, each function has its color code, like the residential administration, residential, recreational and tourism, fishing harbor, commercial, cultural, poetic dwell plaza and gallery, Al Mutanabbi Street, aqua park, academic, and environmental zones. So, talking about zoning and circulation, the gray roads show the new circulation for the island with the main court or main plazas for circulation and some of the parking zones. The highlighted or circulated zones shows the areas like I have done, like an introducing the flow of the water from the river to the island through specific extensions or canals to create some marinas or different activities which will give the project greater vitality. The first zone is the hotel zone, and the water introducing to the hotel zone to create a different theme or different concept of hotels. To the left of the hotel, we can see the stargazing areas with a water flow around it, which will give the tourists or the visitors a great experience, like stargazing in the middle of the water. Then we can see some private villas like marinas on the river. And the last zone is the fishing harbor zone with a flow of water leading us to some marina restaurants. And at some points at the edges of the island, we can see different spots for riverine boats. Designed the surrounding roads and circulation, a transportation network, and renovating the urban fabric and some buildings, remove some, add some infills, like replanning the urban fabric around the island. And talking about the zones distribution on the island, we can start from the upper side with the tourists and recreational zone, starting with the hotel and aqua park and the services, bungalows, stargazing area. Then to the left side we have a buffer zone with a private villas like a marina and the spot of the riverine boats. Then we can move to a little to the south with the residential zones with apartments complex or different kind of apartments complex. And to the left we can see the administration of the project, the aqua park, the water purification center, and we can see some of the cultural plazas to the right side of the island, and the commercial zones to the south and to the center, and the fishing harbor zone to the south. Okay, here we can see a top view, like a site plan of the island with its surroundings. Then, starting for the detailed plans for each zone, we can see the plans of the main hotel and bungalows and the other facilities of the hotel and recreational zones. Then moving to the commercial zones, we have different commercial zones like a mixed use buildings like the first one and the oval one. We have a hypermarket, different restaurants, a mall, and the kiosks. Then moving to the cultural zones, we have conference hall, theater, cinema, opera house, like continue the dream of Frank Lloyd Wright, and a library. At the residential zones, we have a different types of apartments like apartment type A and the plans also of apartment type B and a villa's proposal. Then choosing another function plans or zones to review, we have the aqua park plan, the water purification center plan, and the stadium of the project plan. Also we have the fishing harbor zone, the boat taxi zones, and the schools zone. Then we can move like that for the 3D shots or the 3D visualization of the project, showing some of the different zones of the project, like the hotel in the first picture with the water extension or water canal around the zone. Then we can see a fishing harbor zone and different zones of the walking areas like the plazas and arcades, and we can see how the water extension flows into the river, and we can see the main elevation of the project. Also in these pictures we can see different arcades, different plazas, different water features, and some shots here shows the photo gallery from the Baghdad والشعراء والصور concept, and some open libraries and some of the outdoor plazas and arcades. Then at the following page we can see different shots of the interior of the library with an overlapping between the levels, and we can see one of the water canals, one of the pedestrian walkways, and the perspective visualization for Al-Mutanabbi Street. Then there is the references that are used in both this research and this project. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.